Being at home means being safe. No matter what, you always know that you're safe and relaxed inside the four walls of your home. It's the sigh you let out when you walk in the door. This is the warm and comfortable feeling you get when you're at home. But some people are also scared of being attacked at home. You don't want to think about it, but you can't say you haven't thought about it. Well, everyone was scared when Katie Sepich, 22, disappeared from a party in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Everyone must have had this as a nightmare, right? Even scarier was the fact that her body was found in a dump in the middle of nowhere. But as the cops looked into it more, they found out something terrible. Katie had been killed right outside her home. When it comes to Katie Sepich, things are not what they seem to be. From the crime scene to the people who might have done it to everything else. It was even worse that it took police 3 years to figure out what was going on. And when they did, the outcome was nothing like what they were expecting. Mom and Dad Dave and Jayan Sepich had Katie on December 26, 1980, in Carlsbad, New Mexico. She had 2 brothers, AJ, and a sister, Caroline. She was the oldest of the 3. It was said that Katie was a kind and loving girl, but because she was the oldest, she had a strong presence. Katie liked to get what she wanted, but she always looked out for the people she cared about. My brother AJ says Katie was his best friend and guardian. She was known for being a bit of a clown once you got to know her. She would joke about everything and anything, even herself, according to one of her best friends. As the punchline of the joke, she was the one who pulled it off, with style, wit, and comfort. Katie was an outgoing and sure of herself young woman. People who knew her liked her, and she had a lot of friends. Katie was going to New Mexico University at the time of the case. She wanted to get a degree in business administration, which sounded like a great idea. She was sure of herself, calm, and smart, so this was pretty much the right job for her. She lived in an apartment on the east side of Las Cruces, New Mexico, close to her campus. She also worked part-time as a waitress at El Sombrero Patio Cafe, a lively and famous Mexican restaurant in Las Cruces. Katie still didn't know what she was going to do after college. Even though she was in college, there was no sign of a job or anything like that for her, even though she was working towards a degree. Jayan, Katie's mum, said that Katie wanted to change the world and dreamed of doing something big, important, and life-changing. She just didn't know what it was yet. Katie was seeing someone at the same time. That person was another college student named Joe Bischoff. He was majoring in biochemistry. They were deeply in love with each other, and Katie knew that he was the person she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Joe also fell in love with Katie's fiery and sweet attitude. He loved Katie so much that he bought her a diamond engagement ring. The two were looking forward to graduation because that would be the official start of their lives. Joe's gift was very kind. Things didn't go as planned, though. Katie wanted to keep going to college to get a master's degree after she got her bachelor's degree, but Joe moved back to Gallup, his hometown, and got a job there. They were still together. They just had different things to do in life. They would see each other when they had time in their busy plans. Sadly, Katie would not be able to do any of the things she had planned. Everything went wrong on one terrible night in 2003, and she had to cancel all of her plans. Joe and Katie were going to meet up in Las Cruces on August 30th, 2003. Katie, her roommate Tracy, and Joe were asked to a college party in a neighborhood about a mile from Katie's house. The plan was to have a great time and then spend the night at Katie's house because it was Labor Day weekend. When Tracy woke up the next morning, Katie was gone, which made her feel bad. You could see Joe there, and Katie's things were also there, like her purse, cell phone, and house keys. Katie wasn't in the house when Tracy and Joe looked for her. They called Katie's friends and even went to Tracy's house to look for her. As people began to worry about her, Tracy quickly contacted Katie's parents and asked them if Katie had been to see them. Katie went missing on August 31st, even though her parents didn't know where she was either. Detectives got right to work, and they didn't have to look for long because Katie's body was found the same day, just hours after she was reported missing. People from Las Cruces were walking by an old dump site when they saw something on the ground. Investigations were called right away because it was a woman's body. The cops taped off the area and looked at the body. It was a horrible scene. It wasn't hard to figure out that the poor woman had been used because the body was lying face down and naked. Arms and face cuts on the body were used as defense, and DNA was found under the nails in the form of skin. The body also had burn marks, which showed that the person who attacked her tried to set her on fire afterward, but failed. There were also tire tracks near the body that the police found. They looked clean, like someone dumped her there in a car. The police thought that the attack did not happen in the empty area because of this. Most likely, the woman was killed somewhere else, and then her body was dumped in a remote part of Las Cruces. Since Katie had just recently gone missing, the cops had a good feeling that it might be her. At this point, they didn't even know who the victim was. So Katie's dad, Dave, was called in to help identify the body. Sadly, the body belonged to Katie Sepich, who is 22 years old, and her dad was the one who identified her. The last people who saw Katie were her best friend Tracy and her boyfriend Joe. This led investigators to focus on them more closely. When the police asked Joe about it, he said that they got to the party together. But after a while, he saw that Katie wasn't there. At first, he didn't think much of it because he thought Katie might have left early. It wasn't until Katie didn't show up the next day that he became worried. At the same time, a group of police officers were put in charge of going to Katie's house and looking for anything strange. But when they got to Katie's house, they did find something strange. For starters, a pair of women's shoes was found on the ground next to the bedroom window. It looked like they were kicked off without a plan. Yes, you got it. Katie owned those shoes. As the detectives looked up through the window, they were shocked to see the screen lying on the ground. The window itself was locked and nothing was broken, but her screen was taken off and put on the ground. This made the detectives think of an idea. They thought Katie did leave the party after all. But when she got home, she realized she forgot her keys. She finally chose to break into her own house by climbing up to her bedroom window. The other people thought Katie was tired and didn't want to walk back to the house where the party was held to get her things. The cops thought that Katie had been attacked at this time. Still, there was one more question. Who did it? Did Katie know that person? Was the attack just happen? Why did Katie leave the party? There were way too many holes. The police then talked to Katie's friends again and found out why she left the party. She was mad at her boyfriend Joe because she saw him kissing another girl at the same party. The officers thought this was strange right away, not because Joe had been fired for being a jerk, but because he had never told the police about this. He had some things to explain now. Joe told the cops that he didn't know why Katie left the party in the middle of the night when they first asked him about it, but it looks like he did know after all. It was his fault. The cops became very suspicious of Joe after this discovery because he had basically lied to them. In the end, Joe did say that Katie was mad at him and that he was the reason she left, but he also said that he drove down Katie's street to check on her and even tried calling her the morning she disappeared. These guys thought this was also strange to hear. Joe knew Katie had left her phone at the party, so why did he call her when she wasn't with him? Detectives thought that Joe was doing this to hide his tracks and throw off the cops. This made them even more afraid of Joe. At that point, DNA was the only way for the police to show Joe was involved. It was the early 2000s, so DNA testing wasn't as common as it is now. Still, DNA matching was possible at that time, and the police wanted to get Joe's DNA to see if he was the one who attacked Katie. But what Joe did next made the police think he was up to no good. He flat out said he wouldn't give his DNA for tests. The cops saw this as a clear sign that Joe was keeping something from them. The cops were once again caught in the middle. They had a strong feeling that Joe was the person who did it, but the evidence was weak. DNA testing would have been the only solid proof of Joe's involvement, but Joe chose not to give it to the police. Katie's family was also shocked by what Joe did. He was being shady and unwilling to help, and this was the man Katie loved. For all they knew, he might have been the one who killed Katie. There were many feelings going through the Sepik family, but none of them made their pain go away. In the beginning of their long search for Katie's killer, they also tried to get Joe to agree to test his DNA. During this time, the cops questioned every man who knew Katie and compared their DNA to the DNA found on Katie. However, none of them were a match. Officers kept an eye on Joe the whole time, but he didn't do anything strange, which made things even more confusing for the detectives. Months had passed by this point, but all of a sudden, the cops learnt something new. See, the cops were told that Katie and Joe had been intimate with each other the night of the party on August 30th. To find out more, they tested the bedding in Katie's room and found male DNA on it. When it was sent to be matched, the results were not positive. The DNA from the man on the bed, which was almost likely Joe's, did not match the DNA from Katie's body. That's why the police thought Joe might not have been the criminal after all. But they needed to be sure, and to do that, they needed DNA from the man himself. That's when the police called Joe. They wanted to let him know that his DNA didn't match the killer's because they wanted to be sure and officially rule him out as a possibility. Lucky for them, Joe finally agreed to give his DNA. When it was checked, it didn't match the killer's DNA. So Joe didn't kill Katie, even though his deeds and stories were all over the place. Joe told the police that he didn't want to give his DNA because he knew that he and Katie had been sexual hours before. So he thought that they would find his DNA on her and think that he killed her. Even though Katie's family was very upset to hear this, you can't really blame the guy. That was a very honest assessment, and he may have gotten away with it. But because Joe didn't want to help, the investigation into Katie's murder hadn't moved forward in 3 long months, even though it's scary to be blamed for a crime. Joe should have been honest from the start, because Katie's case would not have moved so slowly. Since Joe wasn't the killer, the police had to go back to their original plan to find the real killer. They now thought that Katie's killer was probably someone they didn't know. Using the DNA, the police were able to figure out what race the killer was. They came to the conclusion that the bad guy was probably a male Hispanic. Also, remember that tire tracks from a pickup truck were found where Katie's body was. The killer was probably Hispanic and drove a pickup truck, which gave the cops some information. But it was still not much. Investigators followed every lead and checked all the known criminals in the area. Katie's family even offered a $100,000 prize for information leading to her capture. But unfortunately, nothing was found. At one point, Katie's mom, Jayan, gave up on ever getting justice for her daughter, but she stuck to her will because she didn't want Katie's case to end. The Sepik family did everything they could to keep the case in the public eye, but 3 long years had gone by in an instant. But Katie's parents had some hope because, in December 2006, a DNA match came up. The killer's DNA was sent to the CODIS database, but there was no match at that time. After 3 years, however, CODIS called the Las Cruces cops and shared some exciting news with them for the first time in a very long time. Who was this person whose DNA matched Katie's killers? It was a man named Gabriel Avila, who was 27 years old. Thank goodness, this man was already in jail in 2006 for aggravated burglary and assault. It was because of this sentence that his DNA was sent to CODIS. This act was done by Gabriel only 3 months after Katie was attacked. He broke into a house with a knife and planned to rob it and maybe even hurt the woman who lived there. He didn't know that the woman also had a roommate, which was lucky because when the roommate heard Gabriel breaking in, he ran away in fear. Eventually, the cops caught him, but they let him go on bond. As soon as Gabriel got out, he ran away. He stayed out of trouble for about 14 months before he was caught again and found guilty of the crime he tried to commit in November 2003. He was given a 9-year prison term for the charges. This was the man whose DNA matched Katie's killer. Since Gabriel was still being held, the cops wanted to learn more about him to help build their case against him. However, the detectives learned that Gabriel was married before, though the marriage ended in divorce. The police wanted to talk to Gabriel's ex-wife to find out more about him and find out where he was on the night of August 30th. When the cops found the woman, they were shocked to learn that Gabriel did own a pickup truck in 2003, around the time of Katie's attack. What really set Gabriel's ex-wife off, though, was something she found in the truck's cup holder. It was a ring with diamonds. Katie wore it all the time. Joe gave it to her as a gift. When Katie's body was found, there was no ring on her finger. Even her parents said she wore it all the time, but it wasn't there when her body was found. For some sick reason, Gabriel took the ring, but it helped the agent with his work. It will sound like I made up the next part, but trust me, it's not. 3 years after the fact, Gabriel's ex-wife still had that ring on her. She thought Gabriel was cheating on her, and I think she probably wished he had been at this point because the real story behind the ring was much worse. Gabriel was linked to Katie's murder by this one very strong piece of proof. The woman gave the cops the ring, and they knew they needed to talk to Gabriel again. Gabriel was in jail in New Mexico at the time, and when investigators asked him about Katie Sepik, he at first pretended not to know anything. That's what the cops thought would happen. So they charged right in and showed Gabriel the ring. When Gabriel saw the ring, it was like his whole mood changed. He knew he could no longer pull off the trick, and he finally admitted to the horrible crime. Gabriel said that Katie was someone he didn't know. Gabriel was driving around in his pickup truck on the night of August 30th when he almost hit a person walking down the street. That person turned out to be Katie, who is 22 years old. And that's how they met. Katie said she didn't need a ride home when Gabriel asked her, so they both kept walking. That really should have been the end, but it wasn't. Gabriel felt very bad and dark when he saw a young, weak and alone woman in the middle of the night. He eventually followed her home. Katie broke into her own house from the bedroom window as soon as she got home and realized she had left her keys at the party. Once Gabriel saw this, he jumped at the chance to do something that would tragically lead to murder. Gabriel sneaked up on Katie from behind and pushed her to the ground. Katie fought for her life at that point. She did everything she could to fight Gabriel off, and she even scratched him. However, Gabriel was better than Katie, which was sad. He was much bigger than her, and he soon beat her up, pinned her down, and then sadly killed her. Gabriel told me that he didn't let her go after he got what he wanted because he was afraid she would have called the cops. After that, he put Katie's body in his truck, drove to the dump, and dumped her there while setting all the proof on fire. Gabriel thought the fire would get rid of all proof of the crime. However, the fires went out sometime after Gabriel left. This could have been because of the wind or a lack of accelerant. Regardless, Gabriel's plan failed, and he didn't even know it. That was what ultimately brought him down. Gabriel was charged with attack and murder of Katie Sepich on December 26, 2006. After he admitted to what he did, he pleaded guilty. Gabriel Avila was given a 69-year prison term by the jury. He had to start serving it after serving 9 years for burglary and assault. As of right now, he is still living and being held at the medium security Lee County Correctional Facility in Hobbs, New Mexico. Katie's Law DNA is a very important piece of proof for solving any crime, and Katie's case was finally solved because of it. Unfortunately, it was 3 years too late. In that time, the real criminal tried to commit another crime, but failed. In the meantime, the police questioned an innocent guy who is still a scumbag. Katie's family was happy with the sentence, but they still thought that something should be done to make sure that criminals don't get away with crimes just because their DNA isn't in the database. The Sepich family asked for a new law to be made after Gabriel was sentenced. It is called the Katie Sepich Enhanced DNA Collection Act of 2010, or just Katie's Law. Katie's parents pushed for this rule so that DNA and other modern technologies could be used quickly to catch criminals. The law called for collecting DNA from people who are caught, charged, or indicted for violent crimes like murder, assault, stalking, kidnapping, or abduction. It was also required by law to use DNA samples to make profiles of criminals so that they could be caught and convicted quickly. This would give the victim's family peace and closure and stop the criminal from hurting anyone else. Susana Martinez was the governor of New Mexico at the time and the prosecutor in Katie's case. In April 2011, she signed the bill into law. Now that we look back, Katie's legacy is the passing of Katie's Law. Her family is at peace, knowing that Katie is still honored. Katie didn't mean this when she said she wanted to do something big or change the world, and neither did her family. Sadly, a chance meeting with a stranger changed Katie's life forever. Katie's family really misses her. Every day, her parents, brothers, and friends remember her beautiful smile and eyes that were full of hope and light. We hope that Gabriel's sentence brought some peace to the Sepich family, even though Katie's death will never be forgotten. This case was really scary. It's scary to think that a stranger could become angry in a matter of seconds and do something terrible. Gabriel and Katie didn't even know each other. But Gabriel, who was not only a stranger, but also a horrible, cruel, and disgusting monster, defiled and killed a young woman who had done nothing wrong. Gabriel decided right then and there to end Katie's life, even though it hadn't really begun yet. That's it for today's case. What do you think really happened? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you love true crime, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next mystery. Until then, stay safe and keep questioning the truth.